Norman Roule is a former senior U.S. intelligence official. Welcome to our program, Mr. Roule.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I would like to start with the recent developments in Azerbaijan. The Reuters reported in other publications that Russia's air defense systems has shot down Azerbaijan Airlines plane. This plane was en route from Azerbaijan's capital Baku to Grozny in Russia's southeastern Chechnya region. What is your reaction to such development?
This tragedy underscores a number of aspects of Russia's air defense systems, which show that its performance is often quite poor. And its handling of civilian aircraft tends to be cavalier and unprofessional to the detriment of the safety of passengers. This aircraft was reportedly shifted to another area of airspace due to GPS jamming by the Russians. This is yet to be confirmed, but this would be consistent with Russian GPS jamming in the region. Russian air defense fired on this aircraft, which demonstrates a poor understanding of their airspace and of their poor communications within their air control network as to the movement of civilian aircraft. But perhaps most damning regarding the Russians is that they did not allow it to land at several nearby airports and forced the plane to go to Kazakhstan, flying over the Caspian Sea, which has caused some to wonder if Russia hoped the aircraft would have crashed in the Caspian and removing the evidence. In any case, the aircraft did land in Aktu. It crashed, 38 survivors, a number of dead. But the evidence does clearly show at this point that Russia fired a missile against the civilian aircraft.
Do you feel that Russia's intelligence services could be involved in this situation with jamming airplane? Do you feel that they could have advised air services to do such things, or there were some instructions before this incident, from your perspective?
It's likely that Russian military intelligence has encouraged GPS jamming in a number of areas where they believe themselves to be vulnerable to Ukrainian drones and other attacks. This said, that does not excuse Russia from the imperative of monitoring and handling the movements of civilian aircrafts. This does demonstrate, just as we saw in the Malaysian aircraft shoot down in 2014, the poor nature of coordination, professionalism, and handling of Russian air defense systems.
What do you expect? What could happen next after this incident in the relations between, for example, Russia and Azerbaijan?
Well, Russia will deny responsibility. That tends to be its traditional response. Russia will attempt to issue propaganda to distort the activities of the aircraft and perhaps to place blame on other countries or entities. Azerbaijan will launch, no doubt, public and international investigation, which Russia will attempt to slow and block. And then Azerbaijan rightfully should be able to seek significant compensation for the families of the victims and the wounded in this terrible tragedy. And Russia will, of course, block that. This will obviously affect Azerbaijan relations with Russia in the near term. But Russia is such a malign actor in the region, it's difficult to see how its relations with many of its neighbors could get worse. But this will provoke outrage among the Azeri population.
Do you feel that this incident has occurred because Russia has launched aggressive war against Ukraine? That's why air defense systems were on the alert.
That will be a common interpretation, but I must go back to 2014 when Russia shot down a Malaysian aircraft. That was not a similar wartime situation for the Russians. There was certainly an effort by the Russians reportedly to jam GPS signals important to the aircraft's movement. But in the end of the day, this is poor handling of air traffic information on civilian aircrafts, poor professionalism on air defense by air defense personnel, and Russia's handling of this will show the nature of its sense of honor. I don't expect Russia to be very honorable in the handling of this accident.
Do you expect Vladimir Putin to get real information about this incident?
It's likely that he will receive a confidential report for his eyes only. It doesn't really matter because anything that comes out from President Putin will be propaganda and will put the blame on Ukraine, Azerbaijan, the aircraft, America, anyone that he can. But I don't think President Putin worries much about these issues.
Let's cover also recent developments inside Russia. A high-ranking Russian general, Igor Kirillov, who was the head of Russia's nuclear and chemical forces, has been eliminated in Moscow by the Ukrainian security services, according to the recent publications in the media and the information from the sources from the Ukrainian security intelligence community. How can you assess this elimination of such high-ranking general in Moscow, and how could it influence Putin's grip on power?
Well, first, this is the elimination of the senior-most Russian general at such a distance from the battlefront. The death of Igor Kirillov is unlikely to, and his assistant, who was also killed in the attack, is unlikely to affect the performance in the near term of the radiation, biological, and chemical defense forces he commanded. But he does take with him experience, his ability to work within the Russian bureaucracy, and he was a profound propagandist. This attack does seem similar in some ways to the death of the senior Russian naval officer Valery Trankovsky that happened some time back. And Trankovsky, who had conducted missile attacks or ordered missile attacks against Ukrainian civilians, much as Kirillov had ordered hundreds of chemical weapons attacks, certainly made them a profound target. This is likely to show the Russian military that there is no length to which they can run or hide without escaping justice for their criminal actions in Ukraine. But I don't see in the near term this is likely to impact the course of the war.
Don't you think that such assassinations inside Russia brings the war closer home to the Russia's elites?
Certainly. And any actions that Ukraine can take in the major cities, particularly Moscow, will demonstrate to the elites that this war is also their war. It's not a war that they can just impose upon criminals in their country, North Koreans, and individuals who are lured by large bounties. It is likely that you will see other Russian senior military officials improve their personal security to avoid following in Kirillov's steps to his death. It is likely that Russia's security services will also increase the intensity of their surveillance of third country nationals or suspicious individuals in Moscow in the near term, and to do more to protect the security of those elites that sustain Putin's war machine.
Do you see this elimination as a big embarrassment for Vladimir Putin personally?
It is one more embarrassment for President Putin. His war against Ukraine has had a series of defeats that's demonstrated the thinness and fiction of his sense of power and power projection, of protecting Russia itself, of Russia being able to undertake such activities without paying an international price. I suspect that Putin, who seems to care very little for human life, will simply find another general to replace Kirillov.
Let's cover also the state of the war in Ukraine. There are lots of analyst experts who are confident that Russia is winning the war against Ukraine right now. Do you agree with them? And do you feel that Russia has achieved its most important objectives throughout this year, the year of 2024, and even earlier?
I certainly don't think Russia is winning this war. Russian objectives were the elimination of Ukrainian leadership, the capture of Kyiv, the domination of Ukrainian territory. It's achieved none of this. Now, it certainly has captured a substantial portion of Ukrainian territory, but its recent victories, so-called as they are, have been measured in miles. That is an extraordinarily low bar of achievement for a country of such acclaimed power as Russia. Indeed, such limited victory demonstrates Russia's weakness overall. This said, it has gone on the defensive. It has laid miles of mines and used its artillery to make counterattacks by Ukrainians difficult. So its defensive posture in these areas will be robust and difficult for Ukraine to move against. But Russia is not winning this conflict.
Also, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is pressing for a ceasefire in Ukraine as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin said that he would be ready for a compromise over Ukraine during his annual end of the year press conference. What do you think about Russia's readiness for a ceasefire, and what does Putin's inner circle think about such an idea? What do they make of it?
I think you have two answers here. Putin is clearly ready for a ceasefire on his terms, which would mean a substantial defeat for Ukraine, permanent secession of the passage of the territory he is illegally seized to Russia itself, denying Ukraine its ability to join the European Union or perhaps even NATO, to avoid reparations that Russia so significantly owes the Ukrainian people. I think that's what he's looking for. And when you look at a compromise by President Putin, it's certainly not one that would cost Russia anything. In terms of the Trump administration, President Trump is serious about seeking a ceasefire agreement. General Kellogg, whom I know is an honorable and a decent and hardworking individual, but achieving a ceasefire is going to be complicated, and Russia will likely make it a lengthy affair. President Trump is sincere about doing everything possible about bringing this about quickly, but Russian demands are likely to be quite stiff.
There are also Kit Kellogg's plan on the other media publications about freezing the front lines in Ukraine, banning Ukraine from joining NATO, but in exchange of a ceasefire with Russia. However, it seems like Kit Kellogg is not also ready to accept all Russia's demand, because in one article he said that the reducing of the size of the Ukrainian army, this was another demand from Vladimir Putin, was not acceptable. Do you feel that the United States and Trump's administration will be able to negotiate an appropriate for Ukraine ceasefire deal?
Well, to be clear, we're talking about a ceasefire. And what a ceasefire means is that we stop the fighting. That does not mean that Ukraine's justified right to the territory Russia seized has gone away. The American position is that a ceasefire is something that needs to happen to stop the killing and the violence. And to do this, Russia must provide significant security guarantees to Ukraine. Russia is going to demand a lot, and you've cited some of this, reducing the size of the Ukrainian military to about 78,000 personnel, a number of other significant concessions. But Russia has got to provide a meaningful security concession of its own. And I think at the very most, Putin is going to seek a ceasefire that allows him to buy time to rebuild his broken economy, to rebuild his shattered military, to restore their weapons capacity, and then also to rebuild a threat that he will pose to other countries in Eastern Europe. So there are reasons for Putin to seek a ceasefire, particularly particularly if they also allow him to fracture Western unity on Ukraine, end sanctions or even reduce the penalty of sanctions, and to compel Ukraine to accept his territorial seizures.